Hello, everyone. This is Kevin and Blair coming to you live with the Week 5 live Q&A for waivers for RotoViz Radio. I'm Kevin Szafraniec, author at RotoViz. Blair is the managing editor at RotoViz. How's everything going, Blair?
It's going great. Looking forward to this week. We got a lot of interesting guys we can add to our teams, and it's the first week we have to deal with bye weeks, so that's always an interesting new wrinkle to add to this.
The ever-evolving landscape of fantasy football that we deal with.
Yes.
So right off the top, I figured you'd be excited to dive into some of the Packers. They pretty much had maybe 3 of the top waiver wire ads for this week from different positions after they threw the ball 53 times on Sunday. Say that was, or actually it was 54, and I do believe that was 10 more attempts than Jordan Love had ever had prior in his career. So like about 25% more than he has ever thrown in his career. I can't really expect that to continue moving forward, but still made for a fun fantasy day for a lot of the Packers receivers.
Yeah.
So at the top, so both Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs are available in more than 50% of Yahoo and ESPN leagues. And I mean, obviously, Wicks was the wide receiver 3 overall in week 4. Had a huge game. Not particularly efficient game, but huge game. And then we have kind of Romeo Doubs, who is just kind of the boring, he's always there sort of veteran receiver in the Packers offense. I feel like I know which way you're going to go with this, but going forward, Wicks versus Doubs is a question of floor versus ceiling. I don't think this is going to surprise very many people.
Yeah, I guess it is a floor versus ceiling question. I mean, I wrote up a lot of those wide receiver breakout articles in the offseason, and it seemed like Dontavian Wicks popped in almost every single one of them. He also popped in some of the like open score stuff that I did in the offseason in terms of, having kind of a in terms of the yak score actually was what he was most interesting about his profile.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think obviously he's got the upside. He got the 2 touchdowns. He's I think a little bit more exciting than Dobbs. He, I believe, played more snaps than Dobbs last week, but don't quote me on that just yet because I could be wrong about that.
So far in the season long, I know
No,
Wicks
that's
only
wrong.
Wicks has 55% versus Dobbs is 81.5%. But as far as last week goes, I'm
Even
not sure.
last week, Dobbs had more snaps than Jaden Reed, even. So, make of that what you will. I mean,
Yeah.
Dobbs is always on the field, it seems like. He was running the most routes last year as well. But he's clearly not earning targets the way that Jaden Reed is, or the way that certainly Dontavian Wicks is. So I think you want the guy who's getting targets and turning them into touchdowns, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
that sound like a thing that would be good for fantasy?
Well, yeah, in general. I mean, obviously too. So Wicks literally had 3 targets in that first game with Love, but didn't convert any of them.
Yeah.
But since then, he's been obviously there's no really to go put up from there. But at the same time, he has been kind of creeping in, and he had a touchdown, I do believe, in week 3. Then obviously he followed it up with 2 more last week, and I believe he dropped the third. So he could have had a bigger game. I'd say that's one of the things that really, that's I guess the downside of Wicks has just been he's not super efficient, and so if he can clean that up. I mean, he's only a year 2 player, even though Dobbs is a year 3 player, a year 4 player, but he feels like he's been in the league for 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's really like, obviously we want to go with the upside guy. I mean, that's generally how I feel about it, but you can't really fault anyone for wanting to put Dobbs on their roster, especially if Wicks is probably going to command a higher fab bid this week just because of the recency bias of him having such a good game. And even in the waiver article, I said, why not try to get both of them on your team? Get them both on there, throw them on your bench, and just see what happens. Because, I mean, as bye weeks and injuries hit, I mean, I guess if I was really hard up, I wouldn't be opposed to throwing both of those guys in my lineup if I actually had to, because I mean, both of them have either the chance to have a big game, and I mean, obviously Dobbs is less exciting, but he has a good floor, so I wouldn't be opposed to trying to add both of them, honestly.
Do we have much more clarity on Watson's injury? I know they were reporting high ankle sprain, but maybe I think last I saw he might avoid IR and could
No,
play sooner than you would normally think for a high ankle sprain.
that would be news to me. The last thing I heard was high ankle, and I was just assuming like 4 games, 4 to 6.
Let's see. I thought just here. Matt LaFleur reveals timeline. Oh, come on. I am using an ad blocker. Get away. I don't know. 5
Yeah.
hours ago, Christian Watson has mild ankle sprain, out at least a week with an injury. There's conflicting reports about whether
Yeah.
he will or will not land on IR. So I don't know.
But, I mean, at least we know that for a week or so, that he'll be out. And on top of it, I mean, the big news is Jordan Love is back, like
Yeah.
across the board, and that's what I was kind of hyping up adding these guys a week ago. Like throw a $1 bid could probably got you either of these guys in your league last week, and now we're sitting here and it could cost. I mean, who knows?
Right.
I would assume between 15 and 20% at least. I recommended spending a little bit more, but I mean, you figure at minimum, about 20% of your fab might go to these guys,
Yeah.
or that's what it might take for you to feel reasonably sure that you'll be able to secure them. And they weren't the only ones. Obviously, Jaden Reed had a good game, wide receiver too. He's not going to be available in any leagues, but I mean, Tucker Kraft came out as the tight end 1 overall this week too. So just across the board, just a big time game for these guys. So how do you feel about him consistently being a tight end 1 with Love back and knowing what we know about the state of the tight end in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, given the tight end scoring, you can't rely on Pitts for sure. You can't rely on Mark Andrews. You can't rely, it seems, on Dalton Kincaid. It seems Laporta is not going to be giving you what you expected from, given the cost you had to pay. I don't know. I mean, I don't think Tucker Kraft will be the tight end 1 many more weeks, but he in this offense he probably gives you a little bit of a floor, and every now and then he'll have a ceiling multiple touchdown game or something that'll be nice. So I think he's definitely someone to add if you are in need of tight end points.
Yeah, and I said Neil Dutton. I know also he was his top tight end ad in the streamer articles today as well.
Yeah.
And just for a little added context too, so the Packers threw 54 times in this game, but last season they averaged 37 pass attempts per game. So that just kind of gives you it's essentially 50% more. I want to say, if I could do the math real quickly, maybe a little about 50% more than they were averaging last year.
Yeah.
So we can't expect this sort of volume, but I would say, like, with how efficient Reed's been, I mean, he's barely running in, any routes as it is, and just making the most out of whatever he gets.
Right.
And Wicks has been running like almost 50% of routes for them as well. So it doesn't seem like a lot of these guys need a ton of time on the field to produce. And I guess we'll just kind of see how it goes moving forward.
Hopefully. Right. No, hopefully we see, Reed in particular kind of take some of Dobbs' routes, but hopefully Wicks too.
Yeah.
Not that Dobbs is, it's easy to forget in the context of this whole offense last season that Dobbs was actually a positive FPOE player as well. Like, he didn't have a bad season. He just, for the number of routes he ran, he didn't earn very many targets. And that's kind of, he had 8 last week, but that's kind of seems to be continuing, that he's more of the win sprint guy.
Yeah. So moving on, in the article, I did mention that Kareem Hunt was the guy that I was, or at least the running back that I was assuming would probably cost the most fab this week, just due to the fact that he's played for the Chiefs more or less. You know, he has a name, so people are gonna be like, "Oh, the Chiefs are a historically elite offense." I don't know if we can call them that right now, but you know, they're an offense that people are always excited about. He's the lead running back in that offense right now. And I just feel like people are going to start throwing money at him, whether it's deserved or not. So it looks like Carson Steele. I mean, he fumbled early in the game and was pretty much relegated to the bench after that. So how are we feeling about Kareem Hunt moving forward? Do you feel like he's a workhorse, committee with P. Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, hard to say what they'll end up doing with Steele. It was, I guess, like you said, the fumble kind of. I think it was the second game in a row he's fumbled too. So that probably had something to do with him getting on the bench. Maybe he's back on the field a lot more in week 5, and we don't see Hunt having this big a workload. That would kind of be my projection, is that it would be a more even split. We'd see more Steele in week 5. So I don't think there's going to be a workhorse in Kansas City anytime soon. Yeah, if Hunt is the most expensive waiver ad, he's probably someone I'm way underbidding on, like trying to get him at a discount.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, especially. I didn't want to really. We talk about him every week, but Braylon Allen is still owned in less than 50% of both leagues, and I said his ownership might actually even go down this week because of such a bad game. But he did have a better game than Breece Hall.
Yeah,
and we also have to take into account, that the Broncos defense is pretty good, and the weather conditions, at least in the first half in that game, were terrible. So like it was just a slop fest all around. But like I said, he's really the guy that I feel like is the most talented. That's generally, at least running back wise, is the most talented and is still available in 50% of most leagues. So if Braylon Allen's available in your league, just please go pick him up. I just don't want to write him up again next week, more or less, is what it comes down to. But I mean, he's so good, and I mean that Jets offense, I feel like, is going to pick up. I just feel like they're kind of just treading water right now. But I think if anybody picks up and anybody's going to drive that offense, it's going to be the running backs.
Right. Even in a game in which, Denver's offense is tough, Breece Hall struggled. He was really bad in this game. But even in that, like, Braylon Allen wasn't great, but 34 yards on 8 carries. He ended with positive expected points added, which is hard to do as a running back who's not getting targets. He only got 1 target. You know, that's pretty impressive against a tough defense. Now they are going to London in week 5 to play Minnesota, another tough defense. So, maybe week 5 isn't the blow up week, but yeah, he's too talented to not be rostered.
Yeah. And also, I wanted to bring somebody up real quick too. What are your thoughts on Tank Bigsby? Because I know in week 1 he looked like the best rusher in Jacksonville. Then he got hurt,
Yeah.
and he was out week 2. He came back and only played 9 snaps in week 3, and then he comes back out week 4 and looks like the best rusher. He's like essentially a 0 in the passing game right now, but looking like the best rusher.
Yeah.
In Jacksonville. Do you see maybe a 50-50 split coming between him and ETN, at least as far as rushing attempts anytime soon? Because that's kind of where I'm sitting.
Right. Maybe as far as rushing attempts. I mean, when you have the kind of game he just did, you kind of force the coach's hand in a way to keep giving you the ball. So maybe in terms of rushing attempts, I kind of think that ETN will still dominate the targets in this offense. I mean, dominate. He had 2 in week 4. It's not necessarily an offense you want to be invested heavily in right now, but Bigsby certainly looked really good. He still only played 17 snaps to ETN's 30, so there's a little room for his share to grow. D'Ernest Johnson got 12 snaps. I think hopefully he'll take more of a back seat, and Bigsby can take more more of the work, although Johnson only got 2 carries. So not like he's doing a lot besides maybe blocking, but still.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, we can live with that. If Johnson comes on to block and Bigsby and ETN are on the field for actually touching the ball, then maybe that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of moving down the line. So last week in the waiver wire column, I kind of had a hot take that blew up in my face, basically calling out DeAndre Swift as more of a name, more style than substance. And then he proceeds to go out and score 29.5 PPR points,
Yeah.
and looks like a beast. So I want to know, do you feel like that is anywhere near sustainable? Because my current thoughts on that are like use that as a buffer for trade value, because I just don't feel like he's the type of player that's going to continue to do that. And I kind of doubled down on my take, like saying, sorry if anybody dropped him on my account because his trade value went up significantly.
Yeah.
So
But
what
you
do you
still
feel
don't
about?
want him on your team.
Yeah, that's kind of To put it bluntly, yep. So how are you kind of feeling about Swift rest of the season?
Yeah, Swift is tricky because he's a player that I've liked for a while, and he does have this kind of dual phase skill set where not a lot of players can get that EP double double that we talk about a lot, that McCaffrey was so good at, and HN is almost the only one doing it this year. Swift has that ability, I think, but he's never really been on a team that's used him that way for whatever reason. Uh, he's kind of he's kind of there and getting that EP double double, or he's like completely not in the game at all. So it's hard to trust his workload for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Khalil Herbert didn't play in this game at all, it seems like, or virtually not at all. He was kind of non-existent. I don't know what's going on with that. If he's possibly not going to be on the Bears roster much longer, or what might be happening there. Obviously, if Herbert is gone and it's just between Swift and Johnson, then you kind of like the outlook for those guys even better, especially if this offense can continue to grow and get better as Caleb Williams kind of gets more comfortable. So, yeah, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic for Swift. I think probably trying to get what you can for him in a trade right now is the smart way to play it, but I also wouldn't really be that surprised if he ends up being a valuable running back from here on out.
Yeah, and something that you touched on that makes me a little more optimistic about them as well is, I mean, Caleb Williams looks like he's pretty willing to check down to his running backs at
Right.
this point. So that's just kind of like just more money in the bank, I guess, for Swift and or Johnson. The big thing that I wanted to bring up as far as Johnson goes, in the 2 games that he's been back, he's averaging 9.4 PPR points per game. And Swift, after his big game, is averaging 12.2. From weeks 1 through 3, he's only averaging 6.5 PPR. So like I just feel like Johnson is the guy that's probably going to end up emerging from that
Yeah.
backfield over time.
Yeah, like even after this performance from Swift, you still, you go into week 5 and you are not eager to start him, right?
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's tricky. I mean, he's definitely got the talent. He's got that upside. We've seen him do this multiple times. We've also seen him be near zero multiple times. So
Yeah.
I think probably he's worth trading away just to avoid that headache. And probably this is the week to do it.
Yeah. And then another backfield that seems like it's a little undervalued and going under the radar is the Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson had that big week 1, scored over 20 points, but since then, not so good. And actually, Antonio Gibson has been the better of the 2 since week 1. So, is Ramondre Stevenson just more of like a one-hit wonder this season, or he's kind of reverting to the inefficiency we saw last season? Or, I'm nervous. I am honestly pretty nervous, and I think Antonio Gibson is a pretty good pickup this week.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Gibson had a good game. 67 receiving yards is always nice to see from the running back position. Stevenson did have more targets and more catches, but was not able to do much with them. It still looks like Stevenson's the lead back in this backfield, but with the way Gibson's been playing, I suspect that the split will even out. You'll see more Gibson. I guess the question is whether either of them have enough value in this offense if they're going to be splitting work and it's not just going to be one guy getting all the targets or something, because that's probably where the value comes from in this for a running back in this offense is from the passing game and getting the targets. If Gibson's going to have to split those with Stevenson or vice versa, then maybe neither of them, even in a game where Gibson had those 67 yards, he still only put up 10.9 PPR points. So, that's, you kind of hope for more for someone getting a good receiving workload, even on a bad team, maybe.
Yeah. And then before we move away from running backs, I wanted to bring up a blast from the past, an old RotoViz favorite from a few years past. Jeremy McNichols. We had a Jeremy McNichols sighting this week.
Yeah.
Scored 2 touchdowns. He had 20.4 PPR points as the backup to Brian Robinson Jr. Is McNichols a thing? I mean, could he be a thing?
He's got to be a thing as long as Eckler is out. It seems like that he's the kind of clear backup. Yeah, 8 rushing attempts. Obviously, those 2 touchdowns, only targeted once, but I mean, he was obviously the only other guy besides Brian Robinson in that backfield and played well. It was interesting after Eckler got that concussion, like they ruled him out for the next week almost right away. I don't know necessarily what that means if that suggests he might be out for a long time, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So, yeah, if McNichols keeps playing this way, even when Eckler does come back, maybe McNichols has taken his job anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I do like Brian Robinson, but I wonder if like another game like this, do you almost start to prefer McNichols because he kind of profiles more as a guy who would play as a receiving back.
Yeah.
PPR formats.
Yeah, I say it's always nice when those guys hit. We had that Tyler Bidet last week, and then unfortunately got hurt. But it's always nice when you see a couple years down the line, some of those old favorites, the really spotted coming out of college can come back and kind of stick in the league. Because I mean, a lot of times those guys are like 5th, 6th round picks, and they don't have the longest leash, so they're quick to either get hit on the practice squad or just dumped all entirely. So to see them kind of come back around is always nice.
Right. Yeah, we did talk about like 5th-year breakouts at wide receiver. It's rare to see that at running back, but I guess it does happen, and it's nice when it happens to a guy that we were on as a rookie and have been. I think pretty much everyone at RotoViz has given up on Jeremy McNichols by now, but still, it's fun. It's so fun to see one of our guys succeed.
Yeah, it was one of those things that when I saw he was on the field or on the active roster, I was like, "Oh, he's still around? Good
Yeah.
for him,"
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that's a good sign. Even when guys can hang around in the league and still make rosters, that's a signal that we should pay attention to.
Yeah. So moving to wide receiver in the article that we put out today for the week 5 waivers, outside of Dobbs and Dontavian Wicks, the other 2 guys in the top tier were Wandale Robinson and Josh Downs, two of my favorites. I say maybe probably a little more lean towards Josh Downs overall. I feel like he might have a little more talent, be a little more dynamic. But overall, like this is I can't even say. I want to say that Wandale Robinson has the higher floor, but in the year of our Lord 2024, playing with Daniel Jones, like his quarterback. So Daniel Jones versus Anthony Richardson. I feel like if Anthony Richardson is throwing Josh Downs the ball, that Wan'Dale has a higher floor. And it feels very weird to say that. Say that anybody has a higher floor because of Daniel Jones. But that's just kind of how I feel right now.
I mean, one thing that Giants have shown us is that they kind of are committed to getting the ball to their top two receivers. We had Neighbors with 15 targets, Wan'Dale with 14 targets in week 4. Darius Slayton was the next most targeted player with 5. So that's nice to see. It does seem like having Neighbors on the field is opening up the field for Wan'Dale to actually earn targets and to do something with them. So, yeah, I think that's a good sign for sure. In terms of what Indianapolis is doing, for one thing, I'm not sure what the status is on Richardson, how long he's going to be out. Maybe he won't miss any time beyond last game. I guess there is a question about whether you would prefer Joe Flacco throwing to Josh Downs anyway, right?
Yeah.
Flacco has, it's almost been better these last few years as a backup than he ever was with the Ravens. But yeah, that he's kind of an interesting guy to have targeting your favorite receivers. And Richardson, like you said, has been Did you put this in your article, in your Monday review article, maybe? Was this the first game he's finished this year with a completion percentage above 50%?
Yeah, on four passes.
It's the only way he could get above 50% is by not throwing more than 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I must say in his defense, especially that I was watching the Colts-Pittsburgh game today. I hadn't had a chance to see it yet. And that first throw that he had to Pittman was like beautiful. Like he could throw some really nice balls, but at the same time, he could throw some. His bad ones are probably twice as bad as any good. Good ball. Like it's so frustrating. It's like how can you look so good at times and then other times just be so far off. And I'm assuming it just comes down to mechanics. I'm not
I don't know.
But it's just like, oh my gosh. But as far as like in Downs' defense, since he came back, he is leading the Colts in PPR points per game at 13.7. He has the most EPA at 7.5. And then he's second to Pittman in receiving yards. So, and he's also tied with Pittman in targets in that time. So it's like he's just good. And I think to your point, like if Flacco is the starting quarterback there, I feel like Downs has the higher ceiling than Wan'Dale. But I mean, it's just, but so like rest of season, the consistency that Wan'Dale's gonna get from Daniel Jones is gonna outweigh what we see from Downs, unless
I guess even with Richardson, there is a chance that Downs plays well enough to kind of become the de facto wide receiver 1 in Indianapolis. I don't think Pittman has as strong a hold on that job as Neighbors does in New York. So from that perspective, maybe Downs' ceiling is higher no matter who the quarterback is. But, kind of the knock on Downs in this offense has always been that he works in parts of the field where Richardson doesn't throw the ball well. Like, you mentioned that the nice pass, I guess most of his nice passes are deep throws and most of his bad ones are not. I don't know. But so maybe the quarterback does actually make a big difference here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like Flacco is like known for his accuracy, but who knows? I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of jump to one of the hot topics right now. Kansas City. Actually, Rashee Rice. It hasn't been confirmed that he's torn his ACL yet. At least the last that I saw. Yeah. So there's still all that's still up in the air. And even when we were on the fantasy football report on Sunday, Hassan brought this up. Justin Watson. We were like, okay, because he said, we played the kind of like, who would you rather have, Justin Watson or X receiver or Y receiver? And then at the end, he said Juju Smith-Schuster, as far as like, what if he's the wide receiver to own? And at the time, I said gross, But looking at kind of Rice's skill set and Juju's skill set, is there a chance that Juju is the guy that they put in there to fill in for Rice? I said nobody wants that, but at the same time, it does make a little more sense than I was kind of willing to give any thought to when it was first presented.
Yeah, that's interesting. Man.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll end this on a high note. It won't be so sour.
I mean, I guess I kind of think that nobody is going to be a 1-for-1 replacement for Rice in that offense, and it's going to be distributed, between Watson and Worthy and Kelsey and Smith-Schuster, and maybe somebody who's not on the team yet, and somebody we probably haven't heard of. So
yeah,
I'm not that interested in bidding on Smith-Schuster. We talked about Watson on Sunday night a little bit, and even that only interests me a little bit, mildly. I think that it's probably Worthy or Kelsey who sees the biggest bump from this, but the offense has kind of not been what we expected, and losing Rice certainly doesn't help. So I think you also might see this offense continue to struggle, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking as well. But it's just, I gotta say, when I was writing this and I saw, obviously I was going to put Watson in there, but then the more I started thinking about him, like, what if Juju is the guy that they try to get to fill that role in? Hopefully not, but I mean, he did catch a touchdown, I do believe, last week, or maybe it was in week 3, but I know he caught one recently, and I was not super happy about it because it could have gone to somebody so much better.
Right. Yeah.
So and so I wanted to end the show on a up and coming tight end. Eric All Jr. Has been actually playing pretty well. He was out. He had a ACL tear and a back injury to end his college season.
Yeah.
Ended up falling to the 4th round. But I mean, he's another one of these Iowa tight ends. And so you say, okay, 4th round with all these injuries, maybe, I mean, easily could have been a 3rd round guy. That's generally what my cutoff thresholds for early draft capital on tight ends is, when I'm looking for like a check in the box, is a 3rd round grade. And in the last 3 games, he has gotten 4 targets in each of them, has caught every single one. Mike Gesicki, he did have that big game against the Chiefs in week 2, and kind of has taken a step back since. Is Eric All anyone that you have any sort of interest in going forward? Maybe even more so dynasty than redraft. But also, I mean, he could, if he's playing this well 3 games into the season coming off an injury, could he end up stepping up in this offense to be the tight end 1 by the end of the year?
I mean, I don't think that's that far-fetched. One thing that's interesting about Eric All, he didn't play very many games at Iowa, obviously, because of the thing you mentioned. So he didn't get a lot of stats there. But in the games he did play, he had a 43% dominator rating. When you plug his metrics into, we actually don't have a box score scout for tight ends, but I kind of built one that's private that maybe if I can get it working, I'll share it. But when you kind of do his or not box score scout, the prospect lab, when you do his numbers in a similar kind of prospect lab, he comes out as one of the top tight ends in the class. And you kind of have to put that in context because he played so few games. And he's also an older tight end, but there's something there probably that always had me intrigued. So now to see him actually start to put it together at the NFL level, I'm becoming more and more a believer in All, and in the kind of whatever the prospect lab is picking out by combining those numbers. So yeah, I guess I don't see a tight end necessarily being that relevant in Cincinnati as the most likely outcome, but certainly I think all could surprise people. Maybe that's not even surprise people. It's not the word, but Dynasty, he's interesting in Dynasty.
Yeah.
Am I trying to pick him up in like an FFPC league? Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, he's somebody to monitor going forward.
Yeah,
That's for sure. And we do have a couple minutes. Do you want to go over any Justin Fields? I mean, QB1 for the week. Do we
yeah.
want to look at what's going on with him? And is he the unquestioned starter when Russell Wilson returns at this point right now, regardless of health?
I think he's got to be, right.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing reasonably well. The team's 3-1.
Yeah.
I mean, how stubborn do you think this Pittsburgh coaching staff to stick to their priors? Like,
Right.
it's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think he's got to be the favorite to lead the team, even when Wilson's healthy. I mean, when the team is winning and he's playing well, what more do you want from him? So,
Yeah,
I think probably it was always kind of weird that they named Wilson the starter so early on in the process without actually having a competition. So almost makes you, well, I don't know, but yeah, I definitely think Fields has done enough to kind of hold off Wilson for a while.
and one thing that I did want to note too, I mean, he had a good game rushing last week. Obviously, he had the 2 touchdowns. He had 10 carries for 55 yards. But on the season, he's only averaging 9.5 carries for 36 yards and like almost a touchdown. I mean, 0.8 touchdowns per game. So, I mean, we haven't seen that. We know what Justin Fields can do on the ground, and he hasn't been doing that yet this season. Whether that's part of the Pittsburgh scheme or something, something just an outlier, but there's untapped potential.
Fields did fumble twice in this last game. That, I guess, would be the only thing where you would look at what he's doing and say, maybe he's turning the ball over too much. I don't know that Wilson necessarily gives you an advantage there, that big of an advantage. So, I mean, especially when you consider what Fields can do with his legs and that he also might be even a better passer than Wilson at this point. Yeah.
Also to that end, like, how long of a leash do you think that he would have if he's a starter? Do you think like one bad game, that's what my biggest worry is with him. It's like, oh, one bad game, like we are, they can always lean back like, oh, we wanted Wilson all along, but he was playing too well. Let's yank him. And then they start playing that back and forth game where Wilson has a bad game and they put Field, like that's really what I'm worried about going forward in Pittsburgh.
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely a concern and something that you could definitely see happening in here in this offense. I don't think that their success is necessarily that sustainable, like on a team level. We know Fields is kind of mistake prone. We know they don't have a ton of weapons. He's going to have a bad game. They're going to have bad games. This is probably, this level of play is not sustainable. And of course, the concern then is he's not sustainable as a starter.
Yeah. And Joe kicks going back. Worst case scenario is, everything's falling apart at that point. Like I say, I mean, that's just one thing that coaching staff, I mean, you look at them and they're old school. I mean, they're going to run Najee Harris 30 times a game. Cordarrelle Patterson, they're sticking to what they like to do. So, and if what they've been saying all along is that they like Russ, that does give me, it's enough to be concerned, I guess I should say.
Right. Yeah, right, for sure.
Well, all right, that will do it for us tonight. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Be sure to check out RotoViz every day. Same articles every week we got coming out. I'll be coming out with some newsroom stuff. I got some good player takes that I'm looking at. Brian Thomas Jr. I think will be the one that I write up next. I'm excited to kind of dive a little bit deeper into him and what he's doing in Jacksonville. And Blair's got the wrong read coming out. Dave's got his passing matchup. Sean's got his Zero B universe. Neil Dutton's tight end streamers is out. I think Ross Durham's defensive streamers will be coming out tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
You got anything else exciting coming out soon, Blair?
No, I got a piece, one of these historical perspective pieces on kind of the tight end landscape and the tight end scoring we're seeing. That is a pretty interesting investigation. Hopefully that'll be out tomorrow morning. So that'll be a fun one.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll give us a little more optimism going forward.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right.
Things can't really get much worse.
Yeah. Amen. All right, everybody. If you want a 10% discount on a 1-year RotoViz subscription, please enter the discount code RVRadio 2024 at checkout. And until next time, take care and best of luck to everybody in week 5.